Welcome back to Ambitious Millennial Women, where I'm having candid conversations with wildly impressive, high achieving women who are creating careers and lives that feel as good as their resumes look. We unpack the self discovery, inflection points, and bold choices they made along the way so you can get inspired, feel connected, and craft your own career that feels as good as it looks. I'm so thrilled to introduce you to Allie Hollowell, a client of mine, also a former business school classmate. And so Allie and I have known each other for well over a decade now. And Allie is the Director of Partnerships at Climate Resilience for All, a mom of two, and a foreign service spouse, which she'll tell us all about in just a second. Allie, let's start this conversation with how we start so many of our coaching conversations, which is what's one thing you want to celebrate yourself for?
First of all, thanks for having me, Sydney. It's really a pleasure to be here. I want to celebrate that I have just started in a dream job, despite being about to move continents with my family because of the foreign service. So terrible timing, but
Yeah.
really excited to have found this opportunity that really fits with what I was looking for and is working on something incredibly important for the world and for our kids and the planet. So that's what I want to celebrate today.
I think that's a pretty good celebration and some bonus points for the cross-continental move on top of it all.
Yes.
Allie, tell us a little bit about your career arc. So, how did you get to this dream job? And then give us a little bit about what it is and why it feels so good to you.
It's funny, I've recently had some coffee chats with young women who have seen me only through LinkedIn, and they reflect back to me that how they love my career trajectory and how I did all this. And it really makes me laugh because it so does not feel like that to me, that this was a thoughtful process of first I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that. But for the last 9 years or so, I've been working in the social sector. I transitioned from the private sector to the social sector in 2016, and that was something I'd been wanting to do for a long time but hadn't. Right now, as you said, I'm working as the director of partnerships for an NGO that's focusing on extreme heat resilience for women and vulnerable communities around the world. And before that, I spent 8 years working in philanthropy for networks, for
Mhm.
philanthropists, impact investors, corporate CSR, and really trying to bring those different groups together. And prior to that, I was in the private sector across everything from cookies and crackers at Mondelez to jewelry and very, very high-end watches prior to business school. And as you said, we met at NYU, where I was trying to use my MBA to
Mhm.
transition from the private sector into the social sector.
Yeah. Funny how I would say probably one, great job on personal branding that your LinkedIn looks good and so cohesive. And then two, there's probably a common through line there of really being able to create opportunities and go where you feel like you're aligned in terms of both your passion and your talents. That does start to create that art that at least looks cohesive to the people on the other side.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll get into your new role in a few minutes, Allie, because I'm really excited to break down why it feels so good to you. But before we get there, let's start where you and I started our work together. We started working together in early 2024 when you had just decided to take a sabbatical with nothing lined up on the other side, which to many listeners of this podcast, they're probably feeling envy that you took the sabbatical and also a little bit of panic and fear because not having anything lined up, not having that perfect plan can be unnerving and sometimes holds us back from what we really want to do. I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what drove that decision and what did your sabbatical look and feel like?
It was definitely a leap of faith leaving without having something lined up. And I was certainly nervous about that, but I was really lucky to have a bunch of particularly women in my life who
Yeah.
had done this and had come out of it with a role that felt more like what they were looking for and was a better balance for the rest of their life. Initially, I was going to be intentional about being off for one
Yeah.
month, not looking for another job for at least a month. And I successfully did that, deleting all the things off my phone that were going to be
Yeah.
distracting and wanting to pull me back into the career mode, just being out in nature, spending more intentional time with my kids, cooking, doing all the things that
Yeah.
I love to do but never made time for when I was working full time. I was also traveling way, way too much in my previous job, 50% of my time at the
Yeah.
end.
I will also just interject international travel.
Yes, international travel. So it was pretty grueling on my
Yeah.
body, the time zone changes. And I would come home and I'd have a 4 and 6-year-old who missed me and wanted 100% of my attention when I was.
Yeah.
It was definitely taking a toll. And the job was just not really aligned to what I wanted to be doing. And so it was just all around burning me out. I really needed that time, but I had said a month and I had multiple people say to me, a month is not long enough. You need longer than a month. And I was feeling financially constrained and I knew that we were moving again for foreign service in 18
Yeah.
months. And so that also felt like a pretty big constraint because the longer I waited to find something, the harder it was going to be to transition, which is now exactly what I'm doing, transitioning.
Yeah.
It was such a great time. And I'm so glad that I had set up coaching as part of that
Hmm.
because I really did take a month where I did nothing and we didn't start for that first month.
Right.
After that, you and I had sporadic catch ups throughout just to help keep me accountable, help give me somebody to bounce ideas off of. And I know I was not the typical case coming into coaching because of all of my different life constraints, but it was so helpful to have a thought partner through that process.
Yeah.
And I really would recommend that. But I think having the people around me who had done it, who had set examples of success. And one of
Yeah.
our friends from business school, I won't name names, but she took 2 years off. And it
Hmm.
wasn't the plan. It
Yeah.
ended up being 2 years. And then I had reconnected with her right as she was starting a new job after 2 years out of the workforce. And I revisited that in my mind many times over the past
Hmm.
year because you have that anxiety creep in of like, oh gosh, I'm going to be out of my game and people are going to be asking why I have a gap. But thinking about people like her really helped. And people who were much more senior than me who had also or were also taking a sabbatical and said, you need to think expansively during this time. If you
Yeah.
go too quickly, you're going to jump into something that's sort of
Mhm.
very similar to what you were doing, which you didn't want to keep doing. And that's true. I got multiple job offers right away for very similar roles, which I did
Yeah.
not want to do. And it was those little birdies in my ear that were giving me that encouragement of don't take the first thing, think expansively, give yourself time. And so that was really helpful throughout the process.
It's funny that you use the word think expansively because there's a concept in coaching called expanders where we use other people as role models for us, but
Mhm.
also role models in a way that expand our perspective. And so it sounds like you had some pretty fantastic expanders. And now, Allie, you're going to serve as expanders for everyone else listening to this conversation.
I hope so, because it was actually the second time I had a career break. The first one was when my husband first joined the Foreign Service and we moved from New York to Singapore. And it took me about 9 months to find a paid job during that time. And I was so depressed, just really
Yeah.
struggling. And I look back on that time and I think, gosh, if somebody had told me I was going to have 9 months of idle time to do whatever I wanted to do and everything would be okay. I would get another job and I would
Yeah.
love that job. And if someone had told me that in the beginning, I would have treated that time so differently. And so I also had that life experience to reflect back on
Yeah.
this most recent sabbatical to just be more present and give myself so much more grace than I did the first time around.
What would you tell someone who's either in thinking about taking a sabbatical, in a sabbatical, or maybe in an unplanned sabbatical, where they're like you in Singapore 9 years ago, where it wasn't necessarily planned, but they're in between jobs and they're not working?
I think it's a combination of things. First of all, enjoy the time and the break. And
Yeah,
especially there's so many of us that are high performers that have like been in
totally.
these really hard driving jobs that you just feel guilty taking a break and you feel
100%.
like I
Yeah.
should be doing more and I
Yep.
shouldn't be lounging and watching TV right now, or I shouldn't be going for a long leisurely lunch and a hike on a Friday. Like,
Hmm.
but why do we feel that way? I don't know. So that's the first thing, is I think at least carving out very intentionally part of that time for yourself, and whether that's going on a retreat to fully take yourself out of life if you
Yeah.
have that accessible to you. I didn't, but I also live in Costa Rica, so I kind of live in a retreat setting. But
Rainforest mountain hikes at
yeah,
your,
exactly. Then the second piece is surrounding yourself with the right people during that time.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
I didn't have that option 9 years ago when I was in Singapore,
Yeah.
because we had just moved across the world and I didn't have a good network yet. But this time around, I had a good network here already in Costa Rica of friends and support. But I also have developed a very strong network virtually and globally. And so I was very thoughtful about at least a couple of calls or connection points with
Yeah.
those people each week so that
Mhm.
I was staying connected and having that support system and putting it out in the universe that I was going through this transition and looking for something else, and but also just having your friends and your support around you. I think it made it very enjoyable. And I had a lot of people who gave me a hard time about that were like, "Oh, you should like charge people for your advice. You're so good at making these
Yeah.
connections for people. You should just bill people for an hour of your time." And I really felt differently because I was getting so much out of it myself,
Yeah.
for being able to connect with people and hear what they were doing and start sparking my brain in different ways and helping me to think expansively, as we were talking about before. The other thing that I did, which I think was really helpful, was I had a really hard physical challenge during my sabbatical.
Yeah.
I did this big hike. We hiked a 12,500-foot mountain, me and three friends. It was intense. It was an intense process.
Hmm.
And I also had just turned 40. So it just really felt like a good moment in time to have a real goal. And it was physically hard. There were literally times where you couldn't think because you're just foot in
Yeah.
front of the other, need to keep breathing, and then being able to tackle that. I know that there's scientific research on this, that if you can tackle something physical, it helps you feel stronger for something emotional or something professionally to get through. And I thought a lot
100%.
about
Yeah.
that during the sabbatical while I was doing those hikes.
Yeah. I love that. So for anyone listening, main takeaway, make sure you go climb a 12,000-foot mountain or at the very least, maybe run a marathon, do a triathlon. To a couple of points I'll make to build off of what you just said. On the first point you mean on just giving yourself grace and allowing yourself to have some freedom and some fun. I so firmly believe and am a proponent that no matter what your situation is and how urgently you need a new role, you cannot network or job search for 40 hours a week.
Mm-mm.
You just can't. It's not going to yield results. Energetically, your effort's not going to be well used. And so giving yourself permission, like you did, is nice to do, but there's also strategic. There's real reason behind it. And then on the second piece, on using your time to connect with people and have what sounds like very generous, deep conversations with people is perfect segue to our next topic. You use your relationships to find this new role. And so would love to hear a little bit more about that. Everyone knows that you need to network to find opportunities, but we don't often dig deeper into that. Like, what does that look like? How do you nurture relationships? How do you turn those relationships into opportunities? And then how do you use that to shape and drive towards what you actually want?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of actually being intentional about networking. And I'm like that nerd that has a spreadsheet of all the
Hmm.
relationships. There were multiple times where I almost quit my previous job. And in each of those times was making a list of who are all the people that I know that I would want to talk to and that I would
Yeah.
want to in my corner. So I'd already kind of started that list. And then when I actually did leave, I really went through that list again and prioritized it based on how close I was to them versus how distant. And so the close ones were the ones
Mm,
that I talked to first because I felt they
yeah.
could be very honest and very open in where I was and not having to worry about my positioning. If it was somebody that I actually really wanted to get a job from someday, then I was waiting on those conversations.
Yeah.
But I literally put dates in with conditional formatting that told me
Yep.
when I needed to reach out to the next person. I mean, it's like, it's literally that
You're
energy,
speaking
but
to the right audience, Allie.
I know,
Everyone
I know,
listening to this
exactly.
is smiling right now. They
Yes.
either have their own spreadsheet or they're about to create one.
Right, exactly. So I really did look through that like once a week at least and kind of prompt me to, oh, I need to follow up with this person. I talked to them 6 months ago. It's a good time to reach back out
Yeah.
and kind of made myself little notes. So there was that. But I think even before that, and it doesn't help for somebody who's maybe already in the situation and doesn't have that network, but I have been building this network for,
Yeah.
and so I think to be able to authentically reach out to people who I enjoyed talking to and who I wanted to spend time with without an agenda. I really didn't go into these conversations being like, I'm looking for a new job, help me. It was
Yeah.
more, let's catch up. And of course, in the context of that conversation, I would mention that I'm on a sabbatical and I'm going to be looking for new things in the future and just want to keep my options open. So people had that in their minds, but it wasn't a transactional conversation. Actually, a lot of the times it was me giving them feedback and
Hmm.
ideas for their own work. And like I said before, that was very energizing for me.
Yeah.
That's the type of person I am. I love connecting with people and I love having very generative conversations and connecting the
Hmm.
dots.
I'll just jump in. It's also a really great way to establish yourself as a thought leader or to
Yeah.
let them feel your expertise or be reminded of your expertise too, versus just being there in more of a very traditional informational interview
Yes.
or something where you're just asking them or only trying to receive.
Yeah. It wasn't really like my goal going into the conversations. It just kind of naturally happened that then I was
Hmm.
giving advice and making introductions. And I had one friend who said to me, "You're so generous. What can I do for you?" And I was like, "Well,
Mm,
I'll come back to you someday when I do need something. But right now, happy to share, happy to help," which was just reinforcing that this was adding value for other people as much as it was for me to be connecting. So I think that those two pieces of just really being authentic and creating those relationships and trying to maintain them over the long term.
yeah.
And then also just actually having a spreadsheet because we can't keep all those names in our minds. I can't remember the number, but there is a limit to how many
Yeah.
things we can keep ready. And so having it written down helps make sure you're not forgetting somebody that might actually be a great person for you to connect with. And that actually is what happened with getting my job is I had been keeping in touch with a former board member who we'd become close. I was doing some consulting for another company and it connected with her work. And so we were connecting about that a couple times. And then she is on the board of Climate Resilience for All.
Mhm.
And they had just raised a good chunk of money and were looking to start hiring. And she thought, oh, this would be perfect for Allie. And I had told
Yeah.
her the types of roles that I was interested in. And she had worked with me previously, so she knew my personality. And I was top of mind for her. And had I not been reaching out on a quarterly basis to her, I probably wouldn't have been top of mind. I talked to a lot of folks about being a foreign service spouse and having to go follow your spouse around the world and how do you rebuild your network
Yeah.
and find a new role each time. So I always talk about that don't go into these conversations like you're looking for a job, even if you are.
Hmm.
Go into it that you're trying to understand and learn and connect. And as you said, an informational interview at a minimum.
Yeah.
And then if it can become something more friendly and kind of authentic relationship, then that's even better. So that's kind of what happened for me.
I imagine you're paying it forward for the people in your network in the same way. And so, in the way that this board member made that connection for you, do you find yourself also making connections or pointing people towards different opportunities in that way?
Absolutely. And I think anytime anybody reaches out to me for an informational interview or advice on a particular career path or this, weird trailing spouse lifestyle, as they call it,
Yeah.
for those of us that are spouses of foreign service officers, I always make time for those calls
Mhm.
because I've been there. And I've been there so many
Yeah.
times, right? Like undergrad searching for a job,
Yeah.
business school searching for a job, then Singapore searching for a job, and then in my most recent sabbatical searching for a job. So I completely understand that mode and really want to help people connect. And it's helpful for the people they're connecting to as well. I've had a couple people say, this person was great and we're going to keep in
Yep.
touch. I think you do need to think of yourself, especially when you're a little bit further along in your career. You have so much to offer. And that's one other thing I will say that has been helpful for me. I think it's a little bit more applicable to foreign service spouses that are being picked up and moved to a different continent or country. But doing pro bono consulting has been
Oh,
an
interesting.
amazing inroad for me to
Yeah.
opportunities and to create a new network in a new community, because it's a way of showing, as you said, you're not just taking from this person, you're
Yep.
actually giving your skill set and you have an expertise that you are sharing with them at no charge. With my previous job in Singapore, when I ended up getting it, I did pro bono consulting for them for 6 months. At the end of it, my boss said, this is all really great, this strategy that you've done for us, but I don't have anybody to do this. And I literally rose my hand and said, oh, look, you can hire me. And
Yep.
that's how I ended up getting a paid job, was by basically proving myself for several months first. And because I was positioned not as a volunteer, pro bono consultant, I was
Yep.
positioned as an expert in my field and directly reporting into the CEO. So when I did get hired, I got hired at a director level or a C
Yeah.
level.
I think that's so important because I have a few other clients who are doing that literally right now. And it has to be meaningful enough and it has to be a priority of the organization. And you have to get visibility, access to resources, et cetera, et cetera. But if you can shape that, it can be so helpful
Yeah.
to open up other
Yeah.
opportunities.
100%. And even if it's not with that organization, but for
Exactly.
them to then be a
Yeah.
reference for you to whatever other role that you're looking for,
And you
it's
get
it's
real
huge.
experience you can speak to, it what's good
Yeah,
on your resume, etc.
exactly.
So, Allie, one of the things that you already knew, but we really put down on paper and defined during our coaching work together is that relationship building and connecting is one of your superpowers, if not your superpower. You so clearly use that over the past few years to find this opportunity. I have a lot of
Cringy.
who will resist networking
Yeah.
at all costs, even though they have a good natural network from grad school. So they have networks to draw on. But the idea of reaching out to someone, asking for something, just gives them the hives. And so, what would you recommend for someone who it just isn't their natural way? And maybe they have some sort of block around it, or maybe they feel more introverted.
Mhm.
What's the tip for the non-natural networker?
Yeah, I think people like talking about themselves and their experience. And so when you go into a conversation and you are genuinely curious about what they do, how they got there, what tips they would have for somebody that was interested in a similar career path, people are always happy to share that. You'd be surprised, even people who are not
Hmm.
super effusive, like will still talk about themselves, right? When you
Yeah.
ask the right questions. So I think it's a matter of being prepared to ask the right questions, going in with a little short list for yourself, and then not being afraid to share about yourself. I think that, these conversations always are warmer when people know a little bit about you and can
Yeah.
feel who you are as a human being. The least transactional as you can be in a
Yeah.
conversation, the better. And then at the end of those conversations, I always ask, who else should I be talking to? They may already have made those connection points for
Yeah.
you throughout the conversation. Be like, oh, I should connect you to so and so. That's what happens a lot for me. That when I'm talking to people, I'm thinking of people that have similar interests or are working in the same vein. And so I'll offer to make those introductions. But if that hasn't organically happened, it's always a good way to close out an informational interview to ask, who else should you be talking to? What podcasts should I be listening to, or
Yeah.
newsletters, or what kind of
Yep.
resources should you be tapping into that then give you some additional ideas for where to take those things? I actually have a friend who is going through this right now, and I've been doing some coaching for her, and she's super
Yeah.
introverted and is just squeamish about
Yeah.
just random small talk with people. And there's a certain part of me that's like, you just unfortunately have to kind of get over that and do it, because it's a natural part. You're not going to find a job by doing
Yeah.
easy apply on LinkedIn, not at this stage of our careers.
Yeah.
Making that list of the people that you know, and again, ranking
Yeah.
it based on who I'm
Yep.
most comfortable with, doing it with people that you are actually kind of friends with in the
Hmm.
beginning helps ease you into it. It just takes practice. I think you become more comfortable with it the more you do it. So starting with people who are like low risk is a good way to do
Yeah.
it.
And the point you made about let's make it as least transactional as possible is so important because I think about my own experience and reaction when I'm on the receiving end of informational
Yep.
interviews. And the only folks that I feel excited and motivated to follow up for or to make a connection or to respond to their email when they send it to me 4 months later to say hi are the ones that I felt some sort of emotional investment in. And that only comes from leaving a little space for the small talk, sharing a little bit about yourself, and then also just approaching the conversation like you're two human beings just trying to get to know each other and support each other.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So you used these relationships to get this great job and you got the job offer and then you had to make the decision whether or not to take it. You also had to make decisions on how you would take it, sequence it with your move, with other consulting opportunities that you also had live. And so, how did you use your operating principles to make that decision in a way that felt really good and grounded and that you just had conviction behind?
I mean, the operating principles literally came up in my first interview. I was chatting with the CEO, and she had said, "Oh, we're this climate organization. We're super focused on women. And I'm looking for a director of partnerships or somebody that can be kind of doing relationship management for me." And I look at my operating principles that I had created with you, and number one on the list was a job with impact. And we had listed
Mhm.
out like what are the impact areas if I had to choose, because I had been pretty cause agnostic up until that point, working at networks, just supporting any philanthropy. But I had kind of honed in on climate, gender, and
Yep.
catalytic capital as the three
Yeah.
things that I would want to do. And it was like, okay, so a climate and gender organization that's doing an innovative insurance product. I was like, yes, that ticks all those boxes.
Feels like
Then
it's going to be okay.
right. And the second one was the role itself.
Yeah.
It's this job that she is out and about at all these different events and meeting people. She's very much the front facing person and needed somebody that could help build those relationships over time and sustain them and steward them. And that's exactly what I really wanted to do. The second thing in my operating principles was that I wanted to have a job that helped me kind of do the relationship management and connecting the dots. I literally sent her a screenshot of my operating principles being like,
It's amazing.
I'm not making this up. This is legitimately what I put in my coaching.
You
What
didn't
the
tell me
heck? That's
that.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool. And then fast forward to a few months when I was actually fielding an offer. I had been doing consulting for another company, a big multinational company as well. And that work was really ramping up, and they wanted me to commit to them for another year. And I had some people in my ear kind of telling me you should
Mhm.
do both and figure out a way to make it work because this is too good of an opportunity to pass up this company as a client, and you can do both. I really, really wrestled with that decision. And I remember I had gone to Paris for meetings with this multinational,
Yeah.
and I was getting the job offer the next day from CRA, and they gave me a hard sell to come work for them. And then I had met with another friend in Paris who actually had made that intro initially and then was now teeing up two other big multinational corporates that he wanted me to do the same type of work for. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I've built this consulting business for the last year and now it's just about to take off and I'm going to shut it down.
Mhm.
What am I doing? And
Yeah.
so I got on the plane home from Paris feeling like a bottle of nerves. And then my husband and I literally scheduled a date to talk through the decisions I had to make. He's works for the federal government and all this stuff was happening
Yeah.
now. So we were a little bit
Yep.
worried of like his job security. And long story short, I went back to my boss, my now boss, and said, I really want to take the job, but I also have worked really hard for this consulting practice and I have a lot of work that's lined up. I'd like to keep going with it and I'm going to hire other people to do the bulk of it, but I'm still going to lead it. Is that okay with you? And she took a moment pause and was like, yeah, we'll make it work. You can work for us 85%. You can continue your consulting 15%. It's not what I had in mind. And I'll have to reframe some of this for the team, but I want to make it work. So
Yeah.
let's do it. And I got off that call and the anxiety that I had felt going into the call, which I thought was because I had to ask for this big thing from her, that hadn't gone away. It actually got worse. And
Yeah.
I started feeling like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do like 85%, 15% is a total recipe for 120% in reality. And my family is about to move continents. And this is insane.
200%.
So I left that conversation again, talked to my husband, and he was like, just go all in on the one job then. That's fine. And so then I messaged, I think it was like 12 hours later, I messaged Kathy, the CEO, back, being like, basically, just kidding. I basically said, I'm going to go all in. But during that process, one of the things that I looked at, I think like number 3 on my operating principles
Right.
was being a good parent and being able to be present for my kids. And I knew in my heart of hearts,
Yeah.
in my gut, that yes, I could professionally do this. I could take
Yep.
on both of those roles and do a good job. But what would suffer was going to be my time and my brain for my family. And I knew that that was a recipe for disaster, especially given the particular moment in time we're in right now. So that was the thing that tipped the scales for me and
Yeah.
gave me kind of permission to say no to that opportunity. And it was really hard to say no to that opportunity because it was a lot of money and it was a blue chip company.
Yep.
And even when I said no, they were still trying to get more out of me. And I ultimately had to stick to my guns. But having that written down on paper helped me have conviction in that decision that I was making the right thing. And then as soon as I did, the wave of relief that I felt
Yeah.
and then excitement for the new opportunity finally all kicked in. Like I hadn't been able to feel that up until that moment that I made the decision to just go all in on CRA and commit to that and not feel like I had to juggle multiple things or like I was leaving something on the table.
Yeah, that's such a good point because it's not like you turned away this big partner and you were sacrificing something. In reality, you were prioritizing something that you knew was incredibly important to you. And
Yeah.
you had done a lot of thinking and reflection and literally putting on paper on your screen the level of importance it was
Yeah.
to you. And that was
Yeah.
being the present parent.
Right.
It's cool to see watching you on the screen right now, which people won't see when they're listening to this, but your energy around this role, and I know you're in the middle of a move, but your energy around this role is calmer and just excited and feels like jazzed about it. And
Yeah.
so I'm not sensing any of that anxiety because you
Yeah.
left it behind, but it's such a good example of how our bodies and our physical reaction will tell us so much. It's our physical reaction, it's the anxiety, it's our gut instinct. And then we're able to identify or confirm why that is from
Yeah.
those operating principles and use the two of those together to make
Yeah.
the right decisions.
Yeah. And it was such a juxtaposition. I take in a lot of advice from people as I make a decision, and I turn and I rely very heavily on my network. And that served me really well around the sabbatical because I
Yep.
had a lot of people
Yep.
that were telling me it was okay to do it and encouraging me to do it. In this case, everybody I was talking to around me, I think because they thought that that's what I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted to have the consulting business and the
Yeah.
full-time job. And so they were encouraging me, including my husband, which I was like, this is going to have a huge impact on you. You probably should not be telling me to do this. But he was trying to be very encouraging for me to go after what I wanted professionally. And he was there to support me on it, which is amazing. And I'm very lucky that I like that. But I also needed people in that moment to give me permission to let it go. And nobody would say that to me.
Yeah.
And So I really had to dig deep and listen to myself. And I think because of the pre work that you and I had done around the operating principles and how important it was for me to be a present parent and not feel like I was constantly taken away from them, either mentally or literally physically with travel, that's what I tapped into in that moment to make the decision. And until I made the decision, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure that it was right. And then, as you said, I physically felt it
Yeah.
in my body, like a big sigh of relief and excitement for what's next.
I'm so curious about how that might influence how you make future decisions too. The external pulling of people versus figuring out, looking internally to feel what's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I will still always do the polling of people. I process verbally. And so,
Yeah,
like, to
yep.
be able to talk to people about things. But I do think there is that certain knowing that, like, you are the only one that can really know what you want,
Right.
what you're looking for. And you might come to that realization by talking to other people. In most cases, I feel like I get a little bit more of a balance. Like, some people say this, some people say that, and
Yeah.
I have to be the one to make the final decision. But in this case, it was actually kind of funny how everybody was like, go for it, you got it. And I was like, no, I don't think I do.
Well, and they're also seeing you as totally confident, the woman who can handle all of these
Right.
balls.
Right,
Totally.
and that's the thing, it wasn't a lack of ability or competency.
Uh-huh.
It was, 1, a bandwidth issue, and 2, what do I want? Do I really want to be pulled in multiple directions professionally and personally at this moment? And the answer that I eventually came to was no, I really want to focus on one role professionally that I'm really excited about and ticks all of the boxes of the things I'm looking for, and my family.
Ellie, you have the mic to speak to almost 10,000 millennial women. What do you want to tell them? What do you wish they knew or trusted, or what do you want them to take away from our conversation?
I think maybe just a plug for more women to share their stories.
Mhm.
I was so cringing when you were announcing, this very impressive millennial woman. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a perfectly normal self-esteem, but I think it's
Yep.
just very female that we don't want to toot our own horn. And I think for your audience, it is so helpful to remember that we are setting examples for
Yep.
that next generation of women. And so the more they can hear and see people who are modeling the kind of careers that they want to have, as you said, it helps you to think expansively when you have more examples to draw from.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with this one little anecdote. I was in line at an airport and there was a crazy long line. Got stuck next to this young woman, and I usually have my headphones on and I don't talk to people in airport lines, but for whatever reason, we started talking. She was a young woman, and she said she was holding off on making a big career decision because she was hoping to get married and have kids.
Hmm.
She had a partner, but she was not engaged yet, and she
Yeah.
certainly wasn't pregnant. And so I shared my story with her of, like, life takes you in interesting directions. And if
Hmm.
you wait to make the big move until
Yeah.
you've got everything else lined up,
Yep.
you might never make that move. So do the thing that you want to do, go after the promotion, make the big move, whatever it is. Don't wait. You will figure it out. If you have to make changes later, you can, but you never know when that's going to happen. And it was funny because I just was sort of saying it off the cuff. It wasn't a super thoughtful, like, if I was going to give advice to my younger self,
Yeah.
it just kind of came out. And she was gobsmacked. She literally was like, you just changed my life right now. Oh, wow. Okay. I don't even know your name, but
Yeah.
it was a 15-20 minute conversation
Yeah.
that totally unlocked a piece of her brain and a piece of her future that she was shutting down for herself. And I think that for me was a good reminder of just sharing our experiences
Yeah.
without judgment and without it being
Yep.
like, you should do this, just being like, this is what I did and this is how it worked out. And it might just change somebody's life in an airport line.
Let's stop there. That's mic drop moment. Perfect. Share your stories, change other people's lives. Thank you, Allie. This has been fantastic. And I can't wait for the women in this community to benefit from hearing your story.
Thanks, Sydney. Thanks again for having me. Always a pleasure.